argument, a whole other debate and conversation we could be having about, do adults learn languages like kids? And because, you see all these people recommending that adults should learn English like children learn English. And then other people are going, no, that's ridiculous. Adults aren't children. People should learn English by studying it. It's not just exposure and all these. And then you get the big, language learning argument and discussion stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. In this episode, we're just focusing on what happens with the kids when they're small and the importance of starting them with English at that age, and sort of how that can actually be done. Another thing, though, that's in my mind at this point is I'm just thinking about what some of my audience members might be thinking, which is that they are out there in the world with English as a second language or other language or something. And they might think, right, I'd love my kids to learn English from the very beginning. And I'd love to be able to talk to them in English and have a relationship with them in English. But they might think, but my English isn't good enough. Now, I've had comments from listeners saying that very thing, which is like, I'd love to help my kids with their English, but I don't want to speak to them in English because I feel like my English isn't good enough. I don't want to teach them bad English.
Yes, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. But if you think about it like this, well, the first part of this is that if you think about how we learn languages, how we've learned languages since we were in caves, we've learned by hearing our parents and the people in our close surroundings speak it. That is the way our brains have been wired to learn. So, if that is what we know to be true, which we do, that language needs to be learned from the family, or is best learned from the family, then imagine that you have an intermediate or above level, let's say, and you say, no, I don't want my kids to hear me speaking English. I don't want them to pick up, to get my pronunciation or get my bad grammar, or I'm mixing up vocabulary. Well, if you didn't use English with them, that's much worse than using English with them.
Yeah.
Because using English with them, you're giving them a gift. You are exposing them. And when we talk about linguistic development, it's all about exposure. So the hours or minutes that your child is going to listen to a language. So the more exposure that they're going to get to English, the better. Absolutely, that is 100% true. The more exposure, the better. And at this stage, you're not trying to formally teach them the language. You just want them to hear it. You want them to listen to it, and for them to understand that English is a positive thing. It's a natural thing. They see their parents speaking it, and that's all.
Yeah. Also, another a whole other debate that you can have about what is perfect English and what is, that's a whole other thing. But the fact is, and when I spoke to David Crystal about this, he replied, I asked him that question and he said, well, just exactly the same thing you just said, which is that some English is definitely better than no English. All those kids who don't get any exposure to English, they're just getting zero. Whereas the kids who are being exposed to their parents speaking English as a second language, sure, there may be a few mistakes and, the pronunciation is going to be different to how some native speakers pronounce or whatever. It might not be standard pronunciation, but it all contributes. It all definitely helps to form foundations which can be tweaked and, sort of corrected later. But there's that inherent sense of familiarity and fluency. And, that's very important. Even if the language isn't sort of quote unquote perfect, it's still beneficial. Yeah.
Exactly. And actually this thing that you say about tweaking, I think is an important concept. So tweaking, making small changes to language as you learn it, as you use it. So in my family, like with me and my husband and my two boys, we decided that my husband is from here, from Barcelona, but we decided that our family language would be English. He speaks quite good English, so we decided that when we are together as a family, we always all speak English. He speaks to them in English. when they're alone, when my husband's alone with the boys, he'll sometimes speak to them in Catalan, but they're used to hearing English. But they hear some of his pronunciation, of course. And the 4-year-old, we went to Canada this summer, and he speaks very good, but there's certain words that he pronounces like a Catalan person, like a Spanish person. And he was saying book. So a book, like a book, right? To read.
Yeah.
And my mother said it's book. So just it's very slight pronunciation thing. Mm-hmm. But he said, oh, book. And now he pronounces it book. It was just a small change, and he doesn't look back to book. It's now book. To
go from nothing to book would be a huge leap, but going from book, what the pronunciation was, I'm not sure. But to go from that to this Canadian version of book was only a small step. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The tweaking as they go.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So how how should my listeners help their kids improve their English or learn English from an early age?
Well, there are 3 things that I recommend doing, and I talk about them as habits, specifically habits, because it's much easier to start doing something and building a habit than thinking about it as you becoming a teacher. And I find a lot of people that I've talked to about this, they feel very overwhelmed by it. They feel very unsure of themselves. So we talk about 3 different habits. Okay, 2 of the habits require the parent to use the language actively. So they need to produce the language. The 3rd is passive, but we'll get there. So the first thing that I recommend doing is simply choosing a routine that you do with your child. So this could be done with even a very small baby, right? You could do this with a 2-week-old baby, a 2-month-old baby. Imagine you're changing them. You could just simply be talking to them about what's happening, okay? And not worrying too much about what you're saying. Just speak to them. So you're changing their diaper, your nappy, diaper we say in Canada.
Yeah, nappy. I don't want any of this diaper nonsense, thank you.
And you can be saying, oh, look at this, I'm changing your diaper. Oh, look at this toy. Of course, here it's a little bit more difficult if you don't have the vocabulary, but you can always look those things up on Google. I mean, it's very easy to review the vocabulary. But it needs to be approached like just a relaxed thing. And the first time it probably will feel a bit strange to be speaking to your child in a language that's not your first language. But then as you develop the habit, if you always do this when you're changing them, or you always do this during bath time, it starts becoming very natural, like any habit. Like the first day that you go to the gym, it feels very forced and difficult. But if you go all the time, then it slowly starts feeling natural and not as difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's the first one. And it's also a great time to pause. And instead of going through routines on autopilot and thinking of other things, doing other things, Magda Gerber, who is known for respectful interactions with infants and young children, say it's the best time to really connect with them. So if you're able to just be totally present and in this moment, use English with them, pay attention, be mindful to what's happening, looking around. We know that little babies, starting around, from the beginning, but especially at 4 months and above, they're just observing the world. They're observing and taking in everything that they see, the colors, the feeling. So if you can talk to them about those things, it's an amazing way to use language.
So, for example, my son is about 3 months old now. Mm-hmm. So when I give him a bath, I can say, okay, we're going to give you a bath now. So I'm just running the water, splish, splash. Can you hear that? That's the sound of the water. Oh, it's going to be nice. I'm just making sure the temperature's right for you. And then when you dip him into the bath, here we go. Oh, can you feel that? Oh, that's nice, isn't it? You feel the water on your legs. Yay, splish, splash, it's bath time. Oh, you're waggling your legs. That's nice. Oh, you're like a little frog, aren't you? That sort of thing.
Exactly. that sort of thing.
It's like, okay, now let's get you dry. Okay, oh, can you feel the towel on you? All right, he's 3 months old, but I mean, if your kid is 1 or 2, I mean, you've got stuff like, at meal times or other times of the day. At meal times, it's just stuff like, okay, it's time for dinner. Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? Are you thirsty? Would you like some water?
Exactly.
That tastes nice, doesn't it? Stuff like that.
Exactly. Talking to them as you would in your own language about just things that are going on, and doing it without being worried about making mistakes. It doesn't really matter. Of course, you can always review the vocabulary later. And we know for most kids, well, for all babies, up until a year and a half, and for some kids it goes until later, like they're not going to reject you speaking in English. They're not going to look at you and be like, who do you think you are speaking English to me? That's not your language. Of course, they're going to accept anything that you give them. But when you have a little bit of an older child, say around 2-3 years old, if you wanted to start using English and you had never used it before, at first it's going to be different. They're going to notice that you're using all of a sudden another language. But they will accept it. You're not going to force it on them. Be like, listen to me speak English. You sit there and listen to me speak English. But you just approach it very like playfully and fun. A mealtime. Hey, would you like to have a glass of water? And they say, what was that? You could say it again. You could repeat it 3 times, and then you could repeat it in your language.
And then your kid goes, no, it's water, not water. What's water, mummy? What's water? It's water. That's
amazing that you say that, because water, I know that's just the way I pronounce it. But my son, the 4-year-old, the first time I said it, no, it's not agua, it's water. And he was like, water. I'm like, what? Is that what I sound like? He was like, war. I'm like, no, that's not what I sound like. But
I'm afraid it is.
I'm afraid it is. Water.
Water. A bottle of water, please. Oi, mum. Give us a bottle of water. What? Who's been speaking Cockney English to him? Anyway.
I have a friend who speaks Cockney English. Good friend. And when we left his house,